Right, 1 second. All right, you're all good to go. Have a good meeting.
Thank you. Back chat. All right, I'd like to. Okay. All right, I'd like to call the Scituate School Committee meeting, November 21st, 2022 to order at 6:04. The Scituate School Committee is committed to providing an environment of respect during meetings. We ask all members to interact in a polite manner, even when there is disagreement. We value the participation of our community and want all participants, including marginalized and minoritized communities, to feel welcomed and respected. We ask our committee members and all who participate to commit to these standards to support and respect our community. And public comment will be available through Zoom as well as in person. And community members can also email me at nbrandolini@cit.org with questions. That being said, we will start with public comment. Being none, we will move on to our student representatives. Hello, hello.
Good evening.
Oh, perfect.
Wow, thank you.
All right, it works. Okay. For this update, SHS Drama Club put on their 2 one-act productions, Knock Knock and When Bad Things Happen to Good Actors, last Friday and Saturday here at the Scituate Performing Arts Center. SHS students from all grades, whether as part of tech or acting, were involved in the show, and with the new director and hours on commitment, the hard work paid off. They were lucky to receive a visit from our own Superintendent Burkhead, and even entertained special guest stars, Miss Naylor and Miss Judy, and I think you guys were lucky enough to go. SHS Model UN team took 26 students to New York last Thursday and came back this Sunday for NYU's Empire Month Conference. Students not only enjoyed a tour of the UN building and Ellis Island, but our team performed exceedingly well in their committees. Anna Kelly and Victor Bowker received awards for Best Delegate, Claire Murray and Allison McGurdy for Honorable Mention, and additional verbal commendations for Savannah Garabedian, Brenda McCarthy, and Ava Ducon. We give them our congratulations.
For the holidays, this week is shortened with a half day on Wednesday. During that, the high school will continue its tradition of splash days where students can sign up for various activities like Frisbee, trivia, polar exploration, and more. Wednesday will also be our first pep rally of the year run by Stuco, which is a joyous opportunity for school spirit, particularly for us seniors. The Shore Craft Fair was last weekend, sporting over 80 artisans in the high school gym. The Scituate High School football team is looking to end on a high note at the Thanksgiving football game this Thursday against Hingham. And finally, winter sports are beginning with practices starting in the next few weeks. If you have any questions, we would love to answer them.
Thank you, thank you. Any questions, anyone?
Well, Victor, do you want to comment a little bit about your your Model UN?
Surely. So while Emma did tell you we left on Thursday, we actually left on Wednesday to get even some more sightseeing in, which was amazing. We got to see a lot of really very cool things, such as the United Nations. We went into the General Assembly, where every world leader since World War II has sat, which was pretty amazing. We got a great tour of there. We went to Ellis Island, Liberty Island, and then we also went to NYU for the actual conference. We were divided into a whole lot of committees. We made a lot of good friends and some enemies, but overall it was an awesome opportunity. I had a lot of fun with it, going in with little preparation, but it worked out in the end for me, so I was happy about that. And I believe this was one of the best awards that we've got here in Scituate. It's the most people that have been recognized. So I think it was an awesome opportunity. We're getting ready to go to Washington, DC in April, and there'll be a conference in Boston, I believe, in February.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your Thanksgiving.
Thank you as well.
All right, next is celebrate student learning with Hadley Elementary School with Principal Ward.
Tonight, I have Christine Sheehan, grade 4 teacher with me to help present. I'm able to share my screen.
On.
Yeah.
Good evening, and thank you so much for taking time to allow us to come in and just share lots of ways that we're celebrating the achievement of students at the Hadley School. Again, this evening, I'm joined by Christine Sheehan. She is a grade 4 teacher at the Hadley School and active in many, many ways at the school. So as we get started, as we get started, just like you've seen with some of the other presentations, these two pillars really drive everything that we do, including the things that we're celebrating. This evening, we hope that will give you some understanding of the collaboration that's happening within our buildings, within our school, and also the culture of excellence. We really are helping kids to achieve, and when they achieve whatever their excellence is, we're there to celebrate with them. And we just wanted to give you a little bit of that this evening. When I was in the school committee meeting the last time, when my colleague Tracy Radin did her presentation, one of the things that I heard mentioned was how are we celebrating the staff as well. So I made sure that I added that piece in. First, we're going to start with certificates of excellence. One of the things that we do at the Hadley School is each month, there are a group of students, any staff member in the building can nominate somebody to receive a certificate of excellence. And that could be, you've got a perfect score on the MCAS, but that also could be that you're very shy and you spoke up in class and you participated. It's whatever your excellence is. Most teachers do at least 2 students. But again, it could be anyone throughout their day that can nominate a student to get a certificate of excellence.
Another important way that Hadley celebrates student growth is through our focus on the positive behavior interventions and supports during all-school meeting. All-school meeting takes place once a month, and the goal of that is really to celebrate all students. As you can see in the picture there, students are welcoming the younger members of their community into the meeting. And we do that every time. It starts with 5th grade, then the 4th graders come in, and just really letting people know that they all belong there, that they were all there to support each other. Each month we highlight a particular social skill, whether that be empowerment, grit, goal setting, or reflection. And we try to build that reflection into everything that we do through these meetings. We send home an activity that students can do. Sometimes those are throughout the month in school where they're reflecting on the lesson that we gave them in all-school meeting. And then at the next all-school meeting, we also always reflect on the skill that we previously taught the month before, because we find that reflection is a difficult thing to understand for students, but trying to give them the practice with that is really important. On this slide, what you see is an example of an in-school activity that was given after our all-school meeting on grit. And you can see that we're asking students to think about the things that they cannot do right now, and emphasizing that it's okay if you can't do something right away, but that you need to then think about the steps. How can I accomplish this? What is it that I need to do in order to be successful? So that's just an example of what we did for that. This year during all school meeting, our meetings are being guided by the book by John Gordon, which is The Energy Bus for Kids. And The Energy Bus for Kids is really a story about having rules to lead a positive life. So our first all-school meeting that we had focused on that first rule, creating a positive vision. Parents and families were invited into the building ahead of the meeting to hear about what we were doing. And also to be a part of our all-school meeting, because it's such an important connection between school and home. These tickets of appreciation that you see up there on the screen, all staff are given those tickets to give out to students for different accomplishments that they may make during the day. But this year, we've also sent those tickets home as well, so that families can give out those tickets to students also for things that they're doing at home. And what's really nice about it is that teachers and families can send those tickets in with the student, and then Mrs. Ward will read those tickets of appreciation every day after school to the whole school, so that everybody's hearing of all the things and accomplishments that are happening here and at home.
Tomorrow morning, when the information is sent out that follows up the school committee meeting, there'll be a video attached that just shows some of the things we're doing with the energy bus. It will also show some examples of some of the tickets that we have received from families that and teachers that we say over the loudspeaker at the end of the day. Other ways that we make sure that we are celebrating student learning. This is a publishing party. This is what after students have completed a writing piece, they're able to invite families in or whoever is special to them so that they can share the writing that they have done. And then those families are always terrific to go around to other students so that they can also show off the terrific job that they've done. The other way is each morning we do make announcements for Lexia Awards and ST Math and Symphony. Those are when they reach new levels. Though Lexia is a program they use in class, but they also can use it at home. And I'm sure if anybody has it at home, many students, as soon as they walk in the morning, they'll be like, new level. It means a lot to them to have their name said over the loudspeaker. And we do it daily. We just think it's better that they hear a few names versus 1 of 50. So we try to do it each morning and they come down to the office. Students also come down to the office with, and we celebrate. Yeah, I do these stickers. I made Mrs. Wood smile today, which was just like a thing I started and it has become like kids come down, they share what they've done. Mrs. Flaherty, Mrs. Piatelli, Nurse Jessica, everybody loves to then celebrate those kids. And that's my dog Macy, who's trained to be at the Hadley School. And this is my friend Charlie, who has learned to do his before school work. Come in, put his stuff away, complete his work, and be ready for the day, which is an accomplishment.
I think this year that Hadley has done a lot to celebrate staff. We always have, that collaboration time is so important with your own team, but we've had the ability to then work in school-based teams as well. So one faculty meeting of the month is dedicated to being on committees. So those committees can range from family engagement to school engagement to staff engagement committees and PBIS. And teachers are able to volunteer for the committee that they have the most interest in. And what's interesting about that is that it has given voice to a lot of staff members who just didn't have the time to do things outside of work. So it's really brought a whole bunch of new voices in, and this feeling of belonging that teachers have, that they're contributing to the vision of the school. So I think that's been a really important development this year. And also going with the making life easier outside of school, having those committee meetings at a time when we're required to be there anyway, and being able to work on those things during that school time. But also some things have been put in place about just to make life easier in general, which are being able to order dinner. I know that Julie arranged for different places in town to allow us to order and have dinner delivered if we so chose. Ordering lunch on Fridays and just those little things that make things just that much easier. Over the summer, all staff members received personal notes from Julie Ward next to me, just making you feel like you belong and getting you excited for the school year. And of course, the PTO Appreciation Committee, I have to thank for the lovely snacks that are always in the teacher's room now. But just making sure that we kind of have everything that we need during the day and just making it just a little brighter. So we all really appreciate that.
We have to mention that tomorrow is Pie Day at the Hatherley School, so every staff member will leave school tomorrow with the pie of their choice. Not a piece, being a complete pie, and I'm gluten-free, and there'll be a gluten-free one there as well. PTO is amazing. One of the other things we try to make sure that we celebrate, on the top picture there, our ILC, PLC, and 3LC paraprofessionals work diligently. Everyone at the Hatherley School works really hard, but sometimes it's more difficult. These individuals are with students all day long, so it's more difficult sometimes to show them the appreciation. So in this particular picture, I did set up a meeting with them, which I'm sure they were thrilled to sit in a meeting with me, but instead what it was just a surprise Sunday party. And it was just to say thank you. They do a lot, they love those kids, and it's important that we make sure that they realize how much we love them. The bottom one, we had a 91 party. You have heard earlier in this year when Assistant Superintendent Driscoll presented the MCAS in 2019, we were the 91st percentile. In 2022, on the other side of COVID, we were the 91st percentile. So we took a morning just to highlight everyone that contributed to that. Hit the bullseye, which is the candy. Some people I had to explain. That's an old candy. Anyhow, and that was everyone. There are people who make sure these kids have hot lunches so that they can perform well. The custodians that make sure these kids are able to be in clean, comfortable rooms. Not to mention the interventionists, everyone along the way, we paused and said individual thank yous to them. It's just another way that we celebrate all that is going on. What are we looking forward to? Each September, January, and June, we do data-driven dialogues. That's when we take multiple indicators and we look at all students and make sure everyone is moving forward. So we look forward to doing that in January. After we do that, we'll switch up groups and make sure that everybody is growing. If you are somebody who is already excelling, you also need to grow. If you're somebody who's struggling to meet benchmarks, we want to make sure that we've helped you meet those benchmarks. So we're certainly looking forward to that. We're looking forward to providing families with multiple opportunities to be an active part of the Hatherley School community. That has been a real goal for us this year. I send out a lot of different emails and I always say we can't go to everything. We're just trying to make sure there's so many offerings that you can make it to something and not worry about the other things that you can't make it to. So we are continuing with that. And also we are always looking for ways to celebrate all of the superstars at the Hatherley School. The Hatherley School is a very special place and it's because of the individuals that come to work there every day. And as I end with a picture of two of our students who attend our PLC program. And one of the paraprofessionals, that is Erin DeWolf. And if that smile on Erin's face doesn't speak volumes for how much she loves her job, and how much we appreciate her, I don't know what will, but that was on a field trip that they went to Sawchuck Farm in Plimpton. And it was an amazing opportunity for all of those kids. And that was a program, a field trip that all of the students in the sub-separate programs went, including the middle school as well. So at that, I will take any questions.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Is it working now? I know, I'm afraid. So, it's gonna start. So thank you for the presentation and I appreciate the update on the staff too, what you're doing with the staff. That's great. I also have to say, I'm so happy that you're doing more with reflection. I teach graduate students and we are still helping them to learn what it means to reflect, to create a practice. So I think it's really good to start early. A couple of questions I have with respect to the reflection, that the one that you showed that said, what's next? And I know it's working on grit. And so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about also having the students sort of check into what's working, what's getting in your way of reaching that goal, so that it's not just for grit? So it's not just like bumping into barriers, but actually knocking down those barriers. So I'm just wondering if there's thought or activities around that sort of approach versus just grit.
So our school psychologist Colleen Frankie and our adjustment counselor Jamie McNamara now, they both do lessons in all of the classrooms. And when they go into lessons, they use the curriculum social thinking, and social thinking is just that. It's characters that get in your way. It might be like rock brain because you want it your way, but then it also teaches the characters that helps you get rid of those other characters that you don't want. And that happens in all of the grade levels. So they kind of flip back and forth with that, the lessons from social curriculum, social thinking curriculum, which all of the elementary schools have. And then they also will go in, so for instance, recently in our 5th grade, we found that it was necessary to teach, if you say, I was just joking, you probably weren't doing something very nice. So we taught, they went in and did a lesson in that because we found some need for that in the playground. So we try to hit both.
Great. In terms of the appreciation tickets, I'm wondering, that feels like a lot of external, right? External motivation with the appreciation. So I'm wondering, I see them when they're graduate students and they're still worried about grades oftentimes because we've programmed them to think externally. So I'm wondering, are you using those tickets in any way to sort of have the kids do some internal motivation building? Like, what are they appreciating about themselves? What are they noticing that they're doing well? I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
We haven't used those particular tickets. Let me say that first. We haven't used those particular tickets for a logistics reason. So we used to do smiles at the end of the day, and you could do just that. And then I realized I was starting dismissal like noon, so I could get through everybody's smiles, because Johnny held the door for me and he was a nice friend. So that's why those tickets are not being used that way. But instead, that's being put into the classrooms with goal setting and doing pieces like that, because I completely agree. It is great. And I say this to kids all the time, like, I can give you a reward for good behavior, I can give you a punishment for not good behavior, but I can't control your behavior. In the end, it's just you. And so I feel like we understand that, and we're having it go into the classroom.
I think that too, with those tickets, it's sometimes when we say accomplishments, we're focusing on end result type things. But I think that those tickets are really trying to focus on those intrinsic motivations, right? You worked really hard, you found something difficult and you tried harder. I don't know why I'm getting feedback. So I think it's inherent in there,
Okay.
you know, to not just reward, oh, you got this on this test. It's how did you get there? So there is a piece of that in there.
Thank you. Nice, one more. Is that okay for you? You mentioned a couple of times that teachers feel like they belong, which I'm really happy to hear, given the sort of climate of teacher burnout. I'm curious, given the district's focus on data, are you collecting data that supports that teachers are feeling that sense of belonging? Like, what are you, is data being collected? I'm just curious.
Yes, we are actually at the Heavenly School doing culture surveys so that we can keep an eye on, do you really feel belong? You know, like, just because I run to Fresh Market, I'm willing to do a little commercial for them because I didn't know about them and now I love them. But Fresh Market, $20 for dinner. I went on Tuesday mornings, and anybody who wants it then takes it home and cooks it. But just because I'm going to the dinner doesn't mean that that makes you feel like you belong. So we're doing surveys so that we can make sure, okay, well, what else is there? Like, communications are always something that we hear about, and trying to work at all the time, and you know, we talk about it at school council as well. So yes, mainly surveys, but then what we've also tried to do is put into place some groups where people have the opportunity to come together, like as an advisory group. That we can just come together and people can bring their thoughts, so that if there's something that people need to feel like they belong, they have a safe place to come and say, hey, this is it. And we're also finding those committees that are happening during the first staff meeting is the other place that we really are getting information. But the cold hard, because I'm a data person, is really through the surveys.
Guess I just have a 12 question. You do now. Oh. Sorry. Sort of a piggyback question. Same question, but related to PBIS. And do you track and monitor that system, and if what you're doing with that is working based on PBIS models, like PBIS Academy models?
The main thing, and I'm happy to pass it over to, the main thing that we're using for that is HSA survey. Last year that very much drove our PBIS lessons. Energy Bus is in place right now because we take the HSA a little bit later. We'll have last year's data and then this year's, and I'm thrilled, thanks to Greg Ranieri, full credit, that we'll be doing it in 3rd grade as well. So now we'll have those kids longer too, because it used to be just 5th grade and we'd be like, oh, that's what they needed, but they're gone. Now we'll have those kids. So that's really the data that we use there. But we also, you know, we can use behavior data that we have, ST data, which is, you know, student teacher support group when people come forward, they need help with children. So we could use that as well.
Yeah, that makes sense, that how it ties into the. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I have just one more. Is back on, yeah. You mentioned the 91%, which is fantastic. I'm curious, you also mentioned that you'll be doing some data meetings over the next few months, I guess. I'm wondering, are you or would you be willing to come back and sort of do a deeper dive with the school committee? Because I know when we look at the breakdown from grade, that 4th grade, for example, you know, I think less than half of the students were meeting expectations of MCAS. And so it would be really interesting to see what that data looks like, what's going on, and what the school's doing to address. Selfishly, I'm worried. I have a kid in that space, so I would just like to hear more about, you know, if you have ideas of what happened and what the school's doing to address it. So that would be great if you could come back when you have more data.
Absolutely, and I would also say that at school council, we could look at it and then it would help me determine what's most appropriate to be sharing. And also, just the other day I sent an email to Superintendent Burkhead. One of the things that's happening is a room full of kids before school learning about math in the grade 5, and which is just amazing to have that be happening. So there are lots of things in place and I would love to tell you about them.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Right, middle school improvement plan next with Principal Beatty.
One moment to get this.
No problem. Your eardrums are done with that.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me tonight to share our school improvement plan. Why we have school improvement plans is the first piece to celebrate and build upon the accomplishments of our school from the previous year. So if you remember from last year, We were in that room and we celebrated things such as a new RTI process to design interventions and monitor any type of intervention, academic, social, emotional, behavioral. We really focused on that last year. We also last year talked about ELA literacy in our Title I math program. We changed around the structure of that, and so we celebrated that. And finally, we did a lot to engage our family and community, and that was a big piece of our puzzle from last year. This year, we have the opportunity to look at recent performance data to say, how can we use what we accomplished last year to increase achievement based on the data that is explaining where we need to grow, and how in those areas where we're doing very well, how can we replicate that in other areas? Key components of our school improvement plan are our school council members. I don't know what happens every year, but every year the best people come out for the school council at Gates Middle School. And they provide a variety of perspectives and experiences, and they help to really shape and shift how we're doing things at Gates and provide feedback. So I'm very grateful, and I am here today to represent all of these individuals, but we just came from there too. We had a meeting at 5 o'clock, so they're watching from home, and they all have helped to contribute to this presentation tonight. When we talk about an improvement plan, we have different sources of data that we use to figure out where are we doing well and where areas we need to continue to grow in. We know that we collect a lot of data every single day in different forms, but the forms that we use to talk about our school improvement plan are, many of them are from DESE, so our accountability percentile ranking in terms of the assessment, the MCAS assessment, achievement and growth play into that. The idea of chronic absenteeism, which we collect as a school and do things with, and then DESE reports out on. And then in this presentation, you'll see a social emotional development survey that we're using with students. And we believe that links directly to everything else if we're talking about raising achievement. So the first piece of data that we'll look at is our accountability percentile ranking. And what this is that DESE ranks all schools. So in our case, a middle school that is comprised of the same grade level and the same kind of format. And they put us in a group and then they rank us that way. And so we are a school in grades 6 through 8. Our accountability percentile ranking right now is the 62nd percentile. And if you look from 2018 to 19 to 22, we are on an upward trajectory, which is wonderful. When we think about where we are though, we definitely want to be higher. We want to be in the 99, we want to be in the 98, we want to have that 91 party, and we're going to get there. And I think when we think about the last couple of years, what we've experienced not only as a school and as teachers and as parents and families, we are continuing to grow. And where that number comes from is a combination of those three factors. So ELA math and STE achievement, ELA and math growth, and our attendance rate. And so if we can continue to grow, go from 51 to 62 over the course of a couple of years, I have hope, I have faith that we are going to continue to go up as we continue to kind of do great things to increase achievement, growth, and increase our attendance rates across the board. When we look at achievement, this is grades 6 through 8 combined achievement. Our goal by the end of 8th grade is to send kids to high school achieving and exceeding expectations, so they are set up for success for their future. When we look across the board, the majority of our students are in that meeting expectations category. And our goal is to shift everybody up to the exceeding expectations category. We want kids in the partially meeting expectations to move up to the meeting or exceeding. We want kids in the meeting expectations to move up to the exceeding expectations. And across the board, we as a school break it down grade by grade. Teachers, look at their own individual student data. We spend a lot of time not only looking at test items and how our test questions worded, but really looking at our curriculum and saying, all right, if a good percentage of our students are outperforming the state and outperforming other people in our cohort, what are we doing to teach our kids so well? And vice versa, if we're not doing well in a particular item or category or standard, what can we be doing to address that, close gaps in a particular area, and get everybody up into the meeting or exceeding expectations. When we talk about growth, growth is that conversation about the cohort. And so each individual student is placed in a cohort, and our goal is for students to outperform themselves. And in terms of our ELA, our average growth score this year was a 47.8, which places us in the typical growth category for ELA. We'd like kids to be in the high or very high growth, but that is where we are at the moment. In terms of math, we saw a decrease in our average student growth percentile. And what that means is that our students are not outpacing themselves within the cohort that they've been assigned. And therefore, the question is, how do we raise growth? How do we raise achievement? And if we can do both, we see growth growing when achievement goes up. Our next piece of data is the absenteeism data. And so the state last year determined because of the number of absences, they needed to redefine what it means to be chronically absent. 2.2% of our students missed over 36 days of school last year. So that means 13 students missed 36 or more days of school. If we went back to the original way that DESE defines chronic absenteeism, which is how we are going to be using it this year, that means 10%. 16.7% of our students, so that's 100 students, missed 18 days of school last year. And you know, these are not excuses, this is where we're at. And this plays a number in that 62, in that 62nd percentile, which we want to obviously increase. We thought it was important to pull out the high needs category, and high needs is defined by students who fit into one or more of the following categories. So low income, English learners, and students with disabilities, because oftentimes these students are receiving services and supports in our school. And if you look, 29% of our students in that high needs category, which is about half of our total students that missed 18 days, fit into this category of high needs. And so if students aren't in school, they're not getting the supports, and therefore they're not, you know, potentially achieving at the levels that they're capable of. 6.6% of our students, meaning 11 of those 13, missed more than 36 days of school last year. And so our job this year is to ensure that students are in school when they're able to be in school, to have conversations and to figure out if students aren't coming to school, why are they not coming to school? And you know, this is not, we are always going to have students who are out. There's no differentiation between my family went to Florida versus I go to treatments on Tuesdays. This is just the data. And so you'll see when we get to our goal section, we've kind of targeted a certain percentage that we'd like to get it down to, knowing that there is always going to be a percentage of students who are not able to make it into the building, and it will be accounted for in the data regardless. This is the most amazing slide of the presentation. So we just gave a survey to students, and this was just last week. And we were curious to kind of start measuring, how do people feel, how do our students feel about our school? How connected do they feel? Do they feel that sense of belonging? Because we know that sense of belonging and being a part of something definitely has an impact on how kids experience school. And if kids are experiencing positive things at school, they're more likely to achieve and learn and grow. Students were asked, do they feel a sense of belonging, and then defined, do they feel included, do they feel valued, and do they feel like they have strong relationships with peers and adults? And we're very happy with the results that we got. In terms of, if you add those up, that's 94% of our students said that they agree or strongly agree. That leaves 6% that we're going to really figure out, you know, what do we need to do, because we want 100% of our students to feel connected and strong at our school so that they can do amazing things. In terms of the highlights of things, the things we can celebrate, our accountability percentile ranking, although we want that to be a lot higher, the growth that we saw in that from 49 to 51 to 62, with everything going on in the world over the last 2 years, that growth is something that we are proud of as a school, and we hope you're proud of too. Our ELA MCAS growth percentiles, when we break it down by who is growing the most, our 7th grades or our sitting 8th graders, they were 1 point away from high growth, which is really great. And when we speak with the educators that taught them and we talk about the kids, we asked, are you surprised? And they said, no, we're not surprised. Our students walked in here. We did everything we could. They worked really hard. So we are not surprised to hear that they outperformed themselves, which is wonderful. And in terms of 8th grade was at 45, which is smack in the middle of typical growth. And we want everybody really growing and just getting better every single day. That's the goal of why we come to school. Our achievement percentiles, despite kind of being, I don't want to say all over the place, the achievement percentiles were those first graphs. We have very high achievement percentiles, and what that means is that the cohort that we are compared to, we did very well within that cohort. And so when we look at our 7th graders, we're at the 92nd percentile in ELA, which is wonderful. They were at the 82nd percentile in 8th grade for ELA. They were at the 77th percentile for 6th grade. So all of our achievement percentiles are in the top quartile. And although they're not necessarily, when you look, we have a range of scores. In our cohort, we did relatively well. We want to get the highest we can go, but there aren't necessarily any areas that are in the lower quartile either. So we're proud of those. And then finally, just the idea of student connection. We're very proud that 94% of our kids on last week said that they felt connected, because that gives us faith and hope that if that's there, that foundation of feeling good and strong and connected to their school, we can do anything. We can achieve anything we, put our hearts to and our minds to, and our kids can do that as well. So that helps to kind of frame the story behind where we're going to be going in terms of when we talk about our goals. Big pieces to focus on for areas of growth. We are working very hard to put a shift in our MCAS achievement levels. We want kids who were not meeting expectations to be meeting expectations or exceeding expectations. For those that were partially meeting, we want them meeting or exceeding. For those that were meeting, we want exceeding. And so we are trying very hard to shift and push everybody into the next level and go as hard as they can. As a school, we are committing to beginning and middle and end of the year assessments in ELA and math. And we've done a great job over the last couple of years creating a consistent curriculum for all students. We have not had a consistent progress monitoring tool in the middle school. They are harder to come by in secondary than they are in elementary. So we have adopted a progress monitoring tool that will help us to not have to wait until next September to find out that people are struggling with improv fractions. We can do something now and close that gap. So we are committed to really using that data to inform our decisions pertaining to curriculum in terms of instruction. And we know that with that action step in place, not that we didn't do anything last year, but with a consistent kind of program-based piece, we will be able to close gaps instead of helping them widen. The other piece is just chronic absenteeism. As we're seeing kind of more consistent attendance rates this year, we are able to define any outliers and make sure that every student is accounted for at all times, provide support to those students that need it, and provide support to families that need it, because we know that if we're looking for kids to be learning, kids need to be inside of the building as often as they possibly can. So finally, the big what now of this, our big goal, as I said, is to get 100% of students in our school meeting or exceeding grade level expectations. And that is an ambitious goal, but that's a goal that is worthy of taking on, because the kids deserve that. And if we have high expectations and high standards for them and support them along the way, they will get there. We are working to ensure our grading practices are equitable, consistent, and communicative of accurate information about achievement. For the last 2 years at Gates, we've been working and talking about grading practices. Oftentimes in the secondary level, we use a student's grades to help us understand who needs more, who needs less. But we're really starting to say, well, what does that grade communicate? And where and how are we communicating accurate information about students learning and where they are? And so as a school, we have had many conversations. We did a book study, and we're really working hard to say, how can we make sure that grades that students are getting, if we're using them as indicators of achievement, are actually indicators of achievement? And that has some implications for societal shifts and things like that, but also work with students and families and teachers on how are we assessing and are we doing our assessing in a way that is supportive of student learning. Finally, we hope to improve the attendance for students who are chronically absent, with a goal of fewer than 5% of all students chronically absent for this school year. It's important that we don't send the wrong message, that every student is expected at all times to be in school no matter what, because the data that we're pulling from does not differentiate between the family trip and going to a treatment on Wednesday. And if a student goes to treatment on Wednesday, a student goes to treatment on Wednesday. And so we believe that 5% would be a reasonable number based on the data from prior, before the pandemic, would be a good area to get. And again, when you look at all of these pieces, if we're trying to get a higher ranking as a school and move from 62 to 72, which then to 82 and 92, all of these pieces play a role in that. It's not just about getting better scores. It's about, ensuring that our kids are in school. It's about ensuring that our teaching practices and our curriculum are aligned with standards. And that's kind of where we're moving as a whole with that. The other piece, the other side, the collaboration and the personalization pillar, we want to make sure that 100% of our students feel connected and have that sense of belonging, because we know that when that foundation is there, again, kids can achieve and learn at high rates. We want to make sure that our families and community feel engaged in our school, and so we want connections there, because we know that families and parents can be very supportive of student learning. We want to make sure that parents and families have the tools to do that. And finally, we're looking for maximizing opportunities for community and family involvement in the school and both outside of the school. And we have seen a number of parents who have helped volunteer for things like the book fair and field trips, and that is wonderful. We have also seen parents and family members and community members come in and strengthen the students' understanding of a topic, or understand, better served by being a judge in a competition and being able to provide good feedback. So we know that when we work with families, community, everyone, that we have the power to continue to strengthen student achievement, and that is why we're here today. So we'll end with just a picture from one of our spirit rallies last year. We have this upcoming on Wednesday as well. It's an exciting day, and everybody smiles and has a wonderful time. So that's where I'll leave you, and I will take any questions that you have after I have a sip of water.
Take your time. Thank you so much, Principal Beatty, as always. We'll let the committee go first. Any questions or comments? That's questions that I want to go ahead.
Thank you, Principal Beatty. This is great stuff. I think most of us here, three of us, see firsthand all that's going on at the middle school. So thank you for your efforts. I know you alluded to this in the presentation, but I was curious if you could give a little bit more specifics on making sure that students who are partially meeting are meeting, and what you want to move them up to the next level. And you alluded that there's a commitment to the more assessments, I guess. Can you explain a little bit if that's directly in correlation to helping them move up from level to level, or what else we're doing to make sure that those students are able to progress?
Certainly, thank you for that question. So in addition to beginning, middle, and end of year assessments, because we're using this tool, it's IXL, we are able to get a snapshot of where students are with a specific skill, which relates to a grade level standard assessed on MCAS. And so if students are working towards getting a score of 80 or above to demonstrate their proficiency. For those students that need more practice with that, we're getting a report saying these kids need that. What we as a school need to do and continue to do and continue to find ways to do is, all right, we have that information, now what are we doing with it? We don't want to just continue to move on in the curriculum. And so in looking at the supports that we do have, and I'm talking right now, kids who maybe didn't master fractions, but are expected to move on to decimals because that's where we are in the curriculum. The question we're asking is, where can we find the support for that student, either inside of the class or outside of the class, to make sure that we're closing the fraction gap before we move on to decimals. And so that happens everywhere across the board, because if you have a student who is, you know, getting that 80%, but is getting 100%, let's say they're getting 100%, we want them to get the 120%. So how are we also providing that student both in the class with the teacher during some form of a lesson, or with the math specialist to continue to grow? Because we don't want that person that is getting 100 to just stop there, because they deserve and should be growing just at the same rate as their peers. So we're using IXL both in ELA and math to better identify where kids are, than making instructional moves, because it's not just let's look at the curriculum and see what we're doing. It's how are we closing gaps through instruction, through reteaching, through enhancement or acceleration for that other piece, because 50% of our kids are meeting expectations. We want that 50% to be exceeding expectations. So we can't just say we're going to focus on those that aren't meeting expectations.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna comment real quick. I think that's really important, because I think IXL is a good tool, but they can take the IXLs and you know, kids and developmentally 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, it's like hyper focus, get my 80%. Maybe I'm not processing the actual methodologies that I'm supposed to be learning, but I can get 80%. You know, and how does that translate into, you know, outcomes and test scores? So I think that's that piece that, like, adding that in you could see some good change there.
I think we have, you know, just the fact that IXL is linked directly to the standards that are assessed on MCAS. It's not a separate thing, and I think that helps us. And I think, Dr. Prokowski, your question to Principal Ward about like internal motivation too, is we are able to, with students, have them track their own growth and celebrate their growth, and they have no idea necessarily what it means, but they're going from a 250 to a 290. That's huge. Whereas if we're just saying, here's the 7th grade math test and you got a 40 and you got a 90, like, kids are individually like monitoring their own growth. And the sooner we can get the bars closer to grade level, great. The sooner we can get it to above grade level, it's like almost like a tangible for them to say, like, my effective effort, the strategies I'm using have given me, you know, these results. And then when it comes time for MCAS, we don't need to shut down and turn into a test prep factory. We can say, look at your growth this year, look at this standard. You started the year here. Look at, you know, you made a bar graph and each month you added a new color, and look where you are, and then let's celebrate that. So kind of making the thinking, not the thinking, but making the growth visible for kids. Because as you said, Ms. Friendly, like the developmental stage of kids and your description of kids on IXL, like.
Not that I have any.
No, but that's you. It's the same thing with MCAS. And I think when you look across the state and you look at MCAS data, I don't think it means that middle schools across the area aren't doing well, but I think there's a reason why when there's a graduation requirement attached to it for 10th grade, why all of a sudden we do good things. So it's, you know, we need to work on grit and all of that. And I feel like the measures we have in place along the way, which we haven't had before, are going to help us, you know, help kids see that when they put the effective effort, they can grow and they're feeling good and they can do more things. So that's the hope.
Who's next? Yeah. Great presentation. Thank you, Principal B. Just had a couple of quick questions, and I apologize if I jump around a little bit. First off, for the IXL, I did like how when my daughter did it, and I was helping her, you could see if you got it wrong, it would actually show you here's the steps you should have done. It did notice that as you get closer to that 80, the points you get goes down. So that- yeah, but if you got one wrong, it jumps. So that was always, up by 1, down by 9. Get it right, down by 9 again. No, I think it's a great tool, and the more tools we can put in front of kids and show them, this is what you can get out of it. If you take advantage, I think it's going to be a big, it's a huge plus for our students. In terms of the percentiles, this might be more for Superintendent Burkhead, do we track individual students as well as at the overall school level? Like, can I see through elementary school, Johnny, these are all the scores he got in elementary and then up through middle school and high school, or are we only looking at it at the overall cohort level?
Justin. Yeah, I think we do a real good job at the elementary school, because they have the built-in measurements and benchmarks that they've been doing a while. So that data does go with the child through the school, all through the elementary. As like Ryan said, the Excel is new because we haven't had any benchmarking at the middle school. In the high school is even harder to do that as well. So we're looking into ways to do that at the same time. So we haven't, I don't believe, Ryan, can correct me if I'm wrong, haven't taken that data from 5th grade and transitioned it up to middle school.
Is that another?
Which could be a good, is my understanding your question correctly, that data travels with the kids so that the teachers will get that information.
Yeah, so if a kid is getting, 50, 51, 49, 52 as they go up through elementary school, how are they doing as they go up through middle school and then high school? Is the kid's on a solid trajectory up? That's great. I mean, even if they're still needing more, at least they're, going up over time. I'm noticing we need to work with that kid more, but, at least being able to track it. The student, from, grade 3 up through grade 10 versus the, just the overall cohort level.
Yeah, I think all these assessments, like Mr. B said, are aligned to standards. So if we're teaching to the standards or kids are understanding standards, that should be reflected in their achievement on the MCAS as well, which data they do have that does follow their lives. So we want it to all be interconnected in a line like that. So students, when they go up, each teacher will have that information in the internet way.
At least at the middle school level, are you seeing from just what we're getting from the state, like is MCAS changing enough year over year that, the goalposts are changing just enough that it's impacting what we're looking at from a percentile perspective, or is it at least consistent enough that we're able to use the data effectively?
I think any form of data we welcome and we appreciate. I think it would be wonderful if it remained consistent, just because that, if we're using data to inform our decisions.
Right.
I don't blame anyone, but I mean, I think the reason why we included 2018, 19, and 22 is because 2020, we didn't get any data because we didn't collect anything, and then 2021, some kids took MCAS at home, some didn't take it, some took half of it. So, I think we are on the upward in terms of right now getting back some consistency, and I think the data will be even more helpful as we move forward in these to come.
And then my last question. So with the focus area on absenteeism, I know we have to aggregate the number of times the kid is out for the state level reporting, but do we actually look at the individual level? So like for that 5%, say 10% of the kids meet the criteria, but 4% are out because of vacations or things like that. Whereas, maybe only 3% of the kids that are out is the true chronic absenteeism that we need to focus on.
So we definitely look at the individual level at the school, and we know who's close to that threshold, and there are things in place in terms of mechanisms in place. So once your group 5 absences, we contact home to say we're noticing this. Being in school is important. Let's set up a time to hear about what's going on. We learn a lot from those conversations, and sometimes it's just, you wouldn't have wanted my child here. They have a 105 temperature, so if you're saying bring them, we don't want them if they have a 105 temperature. So it's good communication, and I feel as though when we then kind of separate it out, we get a better understanding of that number, but that number is always going to be total number of absences regardless of the reason. But we at the school are doing the work to ensure that we're not missing anyone and have any other opportunities to bring them in.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Just to add to that. All of these have been district-wide conversations as well with our leadership, and this goes for the adults as well. So adult attendance is important because teacher, principal, superintendent, when we're not in school, it impacts student learning just as much, so we're having those conversations. I think just putting an importance and emphasis on coming out of a pandemic, that how important it is. A lot of correlations can be made between students not being in the class and or the teacher not being in the class impact student learning. We have great substitutes. We haven't run as many as I like. And however, nothing can replace the classroom teacher on a given day or that student being in that class. So I think we're not only looking at that chronic, I think that's a measurement too that DESE uses. We're looking at every single child because I think, that's a life skill. When you're not sick, you need to be at your job, right? You need to be, it's something that's real life. So I think to teach our children that and have those conversations pretty regularly now, it's an emphasis in the district that we all try to, when you're not sick, be in school. When you are, stay home. Thank you.
Can I just ask an attendance question? Thank you. So to follow up, so you kind of mentioned this, I think, but so far, are you seeing trends and maybe superintendent across the district even better this year? I know it's only been 3 months almost, but so far, are you feeling better about it this year? Or can't too early to tell.
Well, we haven't collected the data yet, so we're at the quarterly mark this time. We'll do the quarterly budget. So now's the time we can start taking snapshots of that, looking at it at each school compared to last year. I think the sense I have, and just speaking with the principals and the adults, is that it's gotten much better already compared to last year. It's anecdotally right now. It's not data.
I thank you for bringing it up in general as just kind of discerning that point out, because sometimes it's just a matter of awareness, like especially from pandemic times and going out, it's like it makes you stop and pause, like, oh, geez, like, okay, maybe we have to know, like, it is important to be at work, it is important to be at school, this is,
And I think the education piece too, and Mr. Beatty pointed it out, that when families know that, oh, I'm going to take that, I'm going to leave 4 days early for that trip. That's a family decision. I respect that. But I also think they need to know that the state doesn't care.
Right.
That's an absence. It's no different than you being homesick. That impacts their children being out of school.
Mhm.
They can get the packet and they can get the teacher to give them the work and make it up, and all of them do. But it's just not replaceable. It's only 180 of them. So again, we just want people, it's an education piece, but it's a community piece for all of us, that it's not just us, it's the entire state, probably the nation
right,
coming out of COVID.
Yeah.
It was,
it's important.
yeah, it's very important.
I just don't think it's being talked about enough, like just the awareness piece of that, showing up is
Yeah.
really important.
Yes, this may be more of a high school question, but if a kid goes on like a field trip to Spain or France, or goes to like a decade competition, does that count as an absent?
Okay. No, any school, same with staff, professional development day, things like that, that's not an absent, nor is it a state absence, because we mark them present in school. Okay, so the state will receive that as well.
Right, turn it over again. All right. What is this? I think it's the speaker. Maybe I'll just move over. Yeah. Yeah, I'll come closer. Thank you, Mr. Beatty, for your presentation. Oh, there we go. I had a question and a comment. The first question was, you mentioned the belonging survey. Did you guys create that, or which one are you using?
So we, Principal Ward talked about the HSA, which provides individual student results. Our district social emotional development team has put together a student survey for the high school and the middle school, which is aimed to capture how students feel at our school.
Okay, because there's some great, just to geek out for a second, there's some great literature around surveys for school belonging. So if there was interest in sort of digging deeper, there's lots of resources out there. The other,
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, sure.
We work with our member thought exchange, the survey thing we use, they have coaches, because that's what they do for their business.
Yeah.
So Mr. Ranieri worked with them, make sure that we used their body of leverage, so this wasn't something we made up. We worked with them, research-based group, to get those particular questions.
great, How many people took the survey? What was the sample?
580.
So, wow, okay, that's fantastic. The other was just a comment, which was around your goal of equitable practices around assessment. I just wanted to sort of publicly thank you for this work, because I don't know how many people realize how difficult this work can be and how important this work can be. There's lots of emerging literature coming out around the role that feedback plays in a kid's experience. It's sort of one of those backdoor ways to build trust and transparency and agency and belonging. And so I think it's hard work and really important work. And I think it'll be really cool because I think it feeds into the other goals that you have. So I just love the reinforcing of your values. So I just wanted to say that out loud so that we could connect those dots. So thank you for that work.
I just had one question. If I should have jumped in at some point, because it was kind of it's something else, but that's all right. First, so it was sort of related to data tracking, and Mike had asked the question about following the student sort of as they go on their trajectory. Do you, from what you're seeing now that you're really digging into all of this and sort of trending by grade level, are you then taking that and kind of pushing it backward in towards 3rd, 4th, 5th grade to say like, hey, here's what we're noticing is maybe a hole that they're not ready once we receive them. And unfortunately, you being in the middle, you've been getting that same potential feedback on the other end, but
I think
that's a big
that's a
piece.
good question. I think that's why we are excited to use IXL, because the only consistent data that we had before was MCAS data. And, you know, 3rd grade standards are different than the 4th grade standards, which then links to the 6th and 7th grade standards. So I feel like this is going to allow for more, more. It's a separate building, like 3rd graders and how do they learn this, and they do great on it and then celebrate, and then they come to Gates and
And you're like, what?
this is great or this isn't great. I think it's going to allow for more, informed conversation to say, here's what we're seeing, and we're all working at the same thing. And I know our 2 department heads and curriculum coordinators, from a curriculum standpoint, are looking at that, but then also our middle school teachers talking to elementary school teachers, and these presentations that we're seeing are wonderful about wind block and about this, and we want teachers working together. And just because we're separate levels and kids are at different developmental stages doesn't mean that the instructional practices, if they're working somewhere, let's keep them going. So I feel like we've been very inspired, not only having more data, but working kind of K through 12 and to keep it all going.
And my last question is not specific to middle school or you or anything, but more just broadly, so when it ties back to conversations with parents about a kid who maybe they need more, stimulation in the classroom, or maybe they need more to be where they need to be, those kinds of conversations, I think it's hard as a parent, and it gets harder as they get older because there's fewer tangibles. So if your child's maybe struggling or they're on the other end and they're, bored, for lack of a better word, how do you connect? This is more just like a broad question, I guess. Something to think about is how do we connect? Everything is very digital, which is great, but also I just see a theme of not having like stuff that I can say, hey, okay, I can see the IXLs and all these things and Google Classroom, but there's something about getting the test sent home that feels like you, as a parent, you can then be like, oh, okay, I see what you did there. Here, I can reinforce what you're getting taught by the team at school, at home. So I guess like, how do we better connect that for parents to best be part of the team and kind of help our kids sell to the next level? I don't have a solution really, but that's just I wanted to give that to you because I know you can solve it.
And we'll solve it. But I agree that I think,
If anyone.
links to the idea of our grading practices communicative of achievement. Because if you're looking at Aspen right now and you see a 78, what does that mean? Does that mean that they didn't understand a concept? Does that mean they ran out of time? And does it mean they, if somebody gets a 0 on a homework assignment, does it mean they don't know how to do it, or they just didn't turn it in? And so I think we're working really hard to pose those questions and then talk about how does that impact what we're doing, how we're doing. So I would say, and as parents, you are always welcome to ask the teacher, I'd love to see where my child is struggling. And I think now that we have this progress monitoring tool, teachers are going to be able to speak with more, authority and expertise on these are the specific areas, and here's my plan for how to close the gap, or here's my plan to, they got 100, they mastered this, and here's my plan for pushing them along. So I think the data helps, but I think it does link to our bigger conversation about grades and communication. And if we're all working together to enhance student learning, we need to make sure that how we're communicating is actually the right way to communicate.
Thank you. Yeah, and I don't think it's just middle school, it's just happens to be you that's here, so I could ask about it all on my mind. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Thank you very much. All right, subcommittee policy update. Mr. Long is going to walk us through some second readings here. We'll do some voting.
Let's get it. In our last meeting, we went through 2 policies in the first readings. The first was EFD, which was our meal charge, and then the second was IHBG, homeschooling. I know Ms. Driscoll couldn't be here tonight. And based on the conversations that Janice and I had, I know Janice was good with the policies, but I guess open up to the committee to see if there are any questions on meal charge.
No questions.
Okay. Does anyone have any problems doing a vote tonight, or do you want to wait?
I'm fine.
Then I move that we approve file EFD meal charge as presented.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Unless it's-
I was waiting for you.
The second one was IHBG homeschooling. Again, any questions of the committee or concerns on voting? Then I will move that we approve policy IHBG homeschooling.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Okay. Thank you all.
Mike. Okay, leadership report, Superintendent Burkhead, as well as Dr. Dutch.
Thank you. Bertolini. Start off while Dr. Dutch is getting prepared. I want to thank the committee as we shared our calendar for the year last year. Draft some of the feedback we got from when the initial drafts was to share quarterly updates in the budget, in the current budget. So I want to thank you all for that. Also want to thank Dr. Dutch and his team. Say so. Bonnie Donahue, and just our team, because we've got a lot of balls in the air right now budgetarily with preparing for FY24, which is intensive work. Responsibly managing the current budget is extremely obviously important. We've got multiple capital projects that we're working on, as you know, and then we're also applying for new capital projects right now. We'll be going for things to get those approved, and also a current maintenance program. And finally, MSBA projects, which we not only have the school project, which is a full-time gig in itself, but we also have the celebrated roof project, high school going on. Oh, great news. So these are really good, exciting things. So just wanted to lay the groundwork for that, and then what the good news is right now, this fiscal year 23, we're in no good shape, which is good news. And I also want to thank Mr. Gates, who has been with us for the school committee, going into the weeds. So he's also an expert. If you have any other questions after the meeting, he can fit as well. So, thank you again for all your work.
Thank you. So I'd like to walk you through the budget update. So you can see where we are at this point in time. And I'll start with the end and say that, yeah, it is. Let me,
Yeah.
let me see if maybe on the Zoom.
Muted on Zoom.
Okay, we'll give this a try now. So we'll start with the end, and just tell you that the news is good. We're in a good place. So I'll try to zoom in on this a little bit and move it over, look large on my screen. So what you're seeing here, I've presented to you the adopted budget for each category. The current budget, meaning what we did after we adopted the budget, which in most cases is the same. Year-to-date actuals, which is what we've spent to this point in time. An encumbrance, which is encumbering all of the funds that we know we're going to spend if we already have dollar amounts. And really specifically, that's in relation to mostly salaries. But there's some expenses that we know what those amounts will be. And in some cases, we've estimated those just so that we could get a bottom line number and know where we are at this point in time. So as we look at the school committee, you can see that at our subtotal, we are at a negative $13,272. And the bulk of that is in the line item for school committee conference. We didn't budget enough for that this year. So we'll have a little bit of a shortfall. And towards the end, I'll talk about where the funds are coming from to cover those shortfalls. If you then look at the next section, superintendent's office, you can see the components of that category. And you see that the bottom line at this point in time is $214,355 still available for us in this line item. So I'll ask for any questions before I move on so that we don't keep going back to slides. Good on this one? Okay.
You're gonna get into the details. We'll probably have questions.
Okay, curriculum leaders, again, I'll try to zoom in a little bit. Curriculum leaders, which are the elementary chairs, curriculum development, some contracted services, which is a lot of the licenses that we utilize. And you can see that after we look at all of the encumbrances, as well as what we've already spent, we have a balance available of $29,981. In the DEI category, you can see that we still have a balance of $29,382. So we're in pretty good shape there. The business office, you can see that there's a shortfall of $9,957. And that's due to some differences in salaries from what we originally budgeted. If we continue with human resource supervisory, you see we're in a good place there with a balance of $101,955. And then finally, business legal services, we budgeted $75,000. And you can see we still have $53,000 available. Any questions on that page?
That's just a general question.
Yes.
So for the year-to-date available, that's going through June 30th?
It's going through June 30th, having taken a lot of our expenses already taken out.
So as we go through some of these numbers, I mean, 29,981, 1,955, like, are we comfortable for the next 7 months if that's?
Yes, because all of that is out of supplies. So the supply line for that area should be sufficient. Given what we budgeted versus what we've already spent, and where we are.
Okay.
Moving forward.
Okay, if there is a year-to-date available that you're concerned about, I'm assuming you're gonna.
I will let you know. There aren't any that are still positive that I have concerns about, and I can explain to you. If we're going to take care of those out of some reserve accounts or grants, I'll explain that. If we'll take care of it through other overages that we might have, but I'll explain the big picture at the end when you've seen everything.
Thank you.
Okay. Going to the next page, technology. We still have a balance of $80,066. And most of that is in the line of IT contract services, which is a good number. We just got a bill for, I think it was $26,000 that was not included in this. That was a today bill. So, you know, those things come about and I'm comfortable like with the dollars that are there. Curriculum development leadership is all salaries. Those are your department heads at the high school and at the district level. And again, that balance is a result of some savings that we might have had. And some changes, staff changes. Moving into building administration, you can see an overall balance of $127,886. And most of that, as I said, is for supplies, memberships, conference, those sorts of things. Salaries are already taken out of this. You can see the salary line item is there. Okay. Teacher salaries, we have a shortfall there of $272,000. And the reason for that is that there are some of our positions are grant funded. And when we're working in Munis, we don't put the grants into this line item. So this shortfall will be covered by some grants. For example, the Medco grant out of a revolving fund for early childhood, some fees that we charge, as well as some other grants to come back. The same is true for special education teachers. So you can see a little bit of a shortfall there of $101,878 to this point in time for the same reason. And I'm not concerned that we will be able to cover those through those grants. Okay. Any questions there?
You're anticipating our questions. Wow.
Okay.
Well done. That was my question.
Support positions. So substitute teachers, we budgeted $315,000. We still have $259,000 available. We are about a third of the way through the year. So that's a pretty good place to be, and that's helpful. Instructional assistance, there's a small supply fund available there. We've encumbered all of our funds. That $25,000 basically equates to potentially one person. So we're in pretty good shape there. They put instructional assistants there twice. I don't know why. So you can skip down the library salaries and a little bit of a shortage there. Brought in somebody new, they might have been a little bit higher than the person who budgeted. And then professional development contractual, that's bringing in speakers. There's a small amount that we budget for that. That's all still available. Any questions there? Okay. Special education. So this is salaries for the special ed director, clerical salary for the secretaries and our out of district coordinator, so you see salaries. And purchases of services, which could be a variety of, contracted sorts of things like psychological services, something along those lines. We do pay for our summer program out of special ed. Evaluative services, if we have evaluations that require somebody to do them other than our own school psychologists, then that comes out of that area. And I'm gonna jump down to the next part of that, special ed transportation. We've got salaries for our van drivers, special ed transportation itself. We pay other folks to transport some of our special ed students, and that is a number that I'm concerned that we will be overdrawn. Not a concern that we won't be able to cover it, but it is already a little bit, as I projected, beyond where we anticipated it being. Private school tuition, we are doing very well there. We have a surplus from what we've budgeted for a variety of reasons, one of them being circuit breaker. And then collaborative tuition as well, we are in a good position there. So you can see that we still have $2,119,000 moving forward. And we've paid the bulk of our private school tuitions and collaborative tuitions already. So we're in a pretty good place as far as that goes. Questions there?
Yeah, can I just ask a general special question?
Yeah.
So with the account that we have with the town, we can ask for money through town meeting or pull money out through town meeting. Do you see us either going to the next town meeting and trying to say, hey, can we get an extra 10,000 just for buffer, or are we not going near that right now?
I think the school committee probably should at some point identify what they want as a dollar amount in that special ed stabilization account. Right now, I think there's $150,000, and maybe a little bit more, put some more in this year. And then identify with the town a mechanism for funding that on a regular basis. And there's a variety of ways potentially to do that. One of them could very well be Medicaid reimbursements that right now goes into the general fund. We could ask to earmark that directly into a stabilization fund, but that would impact the financial forecast and ultimately our bottom lines. We ultimately would be funding that 2/3 of that stabilization fund come out of our indirect budget. Yeah, because that's what I. So I guess the bottom line is you need to identify how much you think you would like to have in there as a buffer for someone who moves in or some other unanticipated expense to be able to cover that. Any other questions on that page? Counseling and psychological, so these are our guidance counselors, including adjustment counselors, as well as supplies. So you can see a balance there, $58,000, and most of that is for everything other than salaries and the clerical materials for salaries. In psychological services, the bulk of that is in salaries. So you can see $14,000 or so is still available. Questions there? Supplies, these are textbooks. Our textbook line item budgeted $146,000. We still have $58,000 at this point. And I would guess that most of that would be expended pretty shortly where we're approaching the end of November. So we should be getting everything ordered. And part of that is that they may very well already be here. We just haven't gotten billed for them. So and therefore haven't encumbered them yet either. So that's why you might see a balance like that. Continuing with supplies and materials. So these are specific supply items for each of our departments. You can see we budgeted 229,000. We've spent more than half of that. We have a balance of 109,000 to 31,000 encumbered. So we're in a pretty good place because most of the time you're getting everything ordered and funds expended, usually by April. By April vacation, we should have spent everything. And if we haven't, we'll look at that as possibly using those funds elsewhere. Because we didn't need them at this point. Still at the bottom of that line are music festivals and virtual high school. We have not expended all of the virtual high school money, and the music festival funds are expended towards the spring when they go off to music festivals. So nursing, we have a shortfall in nursing, and that is all within the school nurse line. We have had some brought in some extra nursing that we did not budget for as a result of COVID management, as well as substitute nurses for field trips, which have increased from what we had pre-COVID during the pandemic. So we'll have to look at that line item carefully and think about what that should be budgeted for moving forward. And then transportation, you can see we are overspent by $253,000. That's one of those line items, you know, we charge bus fees for the users. We do not include the revenue in this accounting. So you'll see what we brought into this point, and it's we've got about at least $300,000 that we can put against that 253,000. So I'm not concerned about that. Athletics, you see a balance of $306,000. A lot of that are the coaching stipends, which are done seasonally. We haven't expended very few coaching stipends at this point. Fall season just ended. We've still got winter and spring. So the bulk of that is, although we've encumbered a lot of it, there's still quite a bit to expend. It's not been encumbered. Student activities, similarly, $128,000. Much of that are the advisors, some of which have been encumbered, not all of it. School security is the SRO, and we know what that amount is going to be, so we've encumbered that fully, even though we don't get that bill until June. So we want to make sure we don't spend that before we get that bill. Any questions there? Okay. Custodial, we have a balance of $38,231. We do have a shortfall in custodial salaries. Because of overtime, most of that overtime is through building use. When people rent our facility, we charge them for that and then back bill on our building use account. So it'll be covered through a revolving account we have called building use. So we're in a pretty good space there. Gas utilities, we've encumbered $412,000, even though we only budgeted $370,000. We know gas prices are going up. Don't know how cold the winter will be, so we'll have to wait and see. I think that's a very conservative number, more than what I expect we will spend, but I would rather be wrong on overestimating than underestimating, because I don't have a plan for having to spend more than that, other than taking it out of other accounts, reserve accounts. Telephone use services and electric utility, we're doing fine there. $47,000 as a balance there. Contract services. So this is anybody who comes in and does contract labor for us, like the electrician, the plumber, CBS, who comes in, does a lot of heating, ventilation work. So we're pretty good there. We have encumbered $82,000 of bills that we know are still coming for work that's been done. But that still gives us $96,929. And I will say of our maintenance of equipment line of $250,000, quite a bit of that is still left. So we're gonna start looking at what we need to do, just try to keep some of that for emergencies, just in case something unexpected arises. Okay, so the bottom line. Just gonna get this here so that you can see it. So the adopted budget was $43,396,000. Our current budget is $43,573,000. You recall at the fall town meeting, there was an additional $212,000 or so. That was appropriated for town meeting, and that's why you see the difference there. Our year-to-date actuals, what we've actually spent, plus our encumbrances. So that gives us about $3 million that are not accounted for. Other than textbooks, supplies, all of those supplies that I can't predict what's still coming. So those are still to be expended. So I think most of that will be spent by the end of the year on those things that aren't encumbered yet, as well as possibly, coming to you for transfers to cover some of the shortfalls in some other accounts. And the reason to do that, get a little bit bigger. I just want to go through the revenue so you know where the money comes from, and then I can talk about how we spend that. So we get $43 million from the town. That money has to be spent by the end of June. It can't carry over from one year to the next. So we spend that money first. We then have grant funds that in most cases have to be spent by the end of the year. The exceptions to that, circuit breaker can carry over for a year, but has to be spent within 12 months of when we receive it. All of the other grants, the IDEA 240, that's the special ed grant, that's usually a 2-year grant. So you have 2 years to expend those funds. We are in the second year, so those will have to be expended this year. The revenue line, besides the town appropriation, those don't have to be spent annually. Those are reserve accounts. So money that comes into those can be saved and spent in further years. So those are the last funds that we will spend. So we try to spend everything from other places first. And that's why you don't see it in the budget and you see some shortfalls in the budget. Additionally, this is the revenue to date that we've brought in for each of these. There's also some money left in reserve accounts for some of these. The exception is the bus lease. Bus lease, we get $250,000 a year. You see that there's a shortfall there of $54,000 for this year. And that'll be the case for the next 4 years. We have our leases for $304,000. So there's the $54,000 shortfall. I mentioned paying the shortfall in transportation. We brought in $230,000 this year so far. We budgeted $220,000, but additionally, there is money left from previous years in that account that will take care of that $300,000 shortfall, and is not likely to spend that to complete that full. Okay, so that's kind of a treetop, somewhat detailed view. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So I don't know, I should have asked this earlier at our subcommittee meeting. Can you, I believe that we just are in the process of hiring a shared position with the town for maintenance. Can you just give a brief overview of how that's impacting this or where that might show up there?
Sure. So just to provide some detail, we did hire a shared position for an HVAC technician. what that should do for us is minimize our expenses for contracted services. We spend quite a bit on heating and ventilation, and in some cases air conditioning, but mostly heating and ventilation. Service calls as things break down. They're the sort of things that you can't let not be fixed, so we have to take care of them right away. So that should decrease our expense there. As far as what that's costing us, it's not in our budget. You don't see that position anywhere in our budget. As Mr. Mr. Gates mentioned, it is a shared position. So we pay 2/3 of that salary and the town pays 1/3 of that salary. And that comes off, what's called off the top. So we identify, let's say there's $60 million of money to be spent. They then take out costs that are shared costs, like health insurance and those sorts of things. This shared position is one of those. So we pay 2/3 of it, they pay 1/3, and working with Mr. Dillon to make sure that the HVAC technician is working for us 2/3 of the time as well.
That was my question. Where is that person's home base?
That, he has a vehicle, and that's really his home base.
Okay.
A vehicle and a phone, and between Mr. Kelly from the town and Mr. Dillon, he is kept busy throughout the day. And I've asked Mr. Dillon to keep track of his time to make sure that out of a 40-hour week, we're getting 2/3 of that. And if we're not, we'll need to revisit how we do this. But certainly when you look at our facilities versus the towns, we certainly account for 2/3 of somebody's, should account for 2/3 of somebody's.
Thank you. Two quick questions. One might be for Superintendent Burkhead, but when we talked about like the library position and we hired someone new, so it's a little higher salary. Just from a hiring practice perspective, when we do look to hire, it's like usually a salary range we aim for, or is it open the position and see if the best person, let's just say they have they're completely at the top of the scale, it's a $50,000 difference that we would hire and then work on the budget afterwards.
We don't always know what positions are gonna open up. So we'll estimate them at middle to upper third of the cost, just to be on the conservative side like anything else. And then we'll go in and when positions open, we'll hire them based on what is out there. I think it comes down to we always want the best candidate. So that's the goal. But the wild card typically is the applicant pool. So for example, elementary, 3rd grade, you might have 30 applicants. Whereas high school physics, you might have 2. So you might not have a lot of options in the high school physics position if they're both qualified and they're both top staff. You're paying over $100,000, whereas elementary, you might have a lot of applicants that are in the lower bracket that are highly qualified that you might choose. It might be less expensive. So we usually budget a little higher on that. As Bob said, like anything else, you want to budget conservatively. But in some individual cases, like the school librarian, we don't have a lot of them. Our budget wasn't a lot of applicants there. We took the best one. That person ended up being a little more than we budgeted.
And for these summary balances across each of these items, is there a particular school that we're seeing is overspending versus other schools that are underspending, or is it pretty consistent across what we were expecting coming into this year?
I haven't really looked at it by school because I'm looking at the big picture. At the end of the year, or as we get closer into the budget, deeper into the budget cycle, I'll look at the previous year. I won't look at the current year because we're not far enough in for me to know. A lot of times, some schools get all their supplies ordered early, knowing that they're going to need them, at some point, so they get them in-house quicker. And others do it bit by bit. So it's really not beneficial to look at where we are currently, but to look at the previous year's expenditures to make sure that the dollar amounts that we've appropriated to each school are sufficient. And principals do that. They're actually in the process of doing that right now. I've provided them with really the last 4 years expenditures, so they can have a pre-COVID year. And then the last 3 years in addition to that, that for comparison purpose as they begin to make their requests to the superintendent and I right now.
I just might elaborate on that, Mr. Long. So what we also do is we have pretty detailed meetings as part of the process with each cost center leader, including the principals. And then now that we've been here 3-4 years, some of us might not be here next year. For 3 years, we've gotten some trends with our principals, so I think we try to target that up front. So when they're doing their budget now, for example, it's different size schools, Hadley might have a different supplies need than some of the larger schools, so they're, but now over 3 years, they can see, okay, this is what we've been spending, incorporate the increase in costs of products. And so we've got a good idea going in so that things start to level off what schools are spending. And I think by the end of the year, like Bob said, the goal is to spend your money prudently and frugally. But if we estimate close enough, which I think we've gotten into in year 3, that money is spent on what we anticipate it will be spent on. A lot of those fixed costs.
And I guess outside of the materials, you look at electricity, you look at natural gas. Outside of the price fluctuations that we might see, is there like one school that we're concerned about? I know it doesn't exist anymore, but the old gates was always a problem for natural gas. Obviously we budgeted 50,000, all of a sudden, because of a cold winter, we did 75,000 just because of the nature of the school. I guess the follow-up question to that is there any, as we're going through this year, is there anything from a capital perspective that we see we need to purchase using our own budget to help mitigate some of those issues? Or because all of a sudden we see something that might break before year end?
Yeah, most of the time it's a repair that we didn't anticipate. I will say that the one expense that's been higher than we expected in a place that we wouldn't expect it is electricity costs at the middle school and the high school combined, because it's one bill. And part of that is because Gates is air conditioned. It's very difficult to turn off an area of the building, so there's a lot of spaces that are being treated either heat or cooling. It may not have somebody in the space, and it's supposed to be automatic. But if you have the technology in your own house, you know how difficult that is to have it function all the time with set points and whatnot. So I think having the HVAC technician on staff who might be able to help us with that is going to be beneficial for us as we move further into the heating season and then into the cooling season. As far as equipment, obviously Gate, Hatherley and Cushing, we need to continue to maintain safety for the students. And so when something breaks, we've got to repair it, and those are the unknowns. And we really, that's where the maintenance line item comes into play, and that's why I try not to spend it too soon to make sure that we can take care of things when they arise.
To follow up to that, so in terms of mostly Cushing and Hadley, of course, but just to support the theme of Scituate Public Schools maintains the buildings we have and takes care of what we have as we proceed to ask for new things. Is there anything in particular that we've had to do at Cushing and Hadley that supports that this year yet?
Yeah, we've replaced a condensation tank in the heating system. There have been several smaller condensers and those sorts of things related to the heating system at both Hathaway and Cushing that we've had to address. Additionally, there are some things that don't fall into the value of a capital project, which is $25,000. So we've got to do them ourselves, and I'll give you an example. It's important to us that we make sure that Wampatuck is a school building that remains viable remains state of the art, as much as practical. So we are doing things to make sure that's the case, and we had a lot of capital improvements this past summer. We've got another planned for this summer with the parking lots. But we also have some maintenance projects that we're looking at. One of them being getting the interior of the building painted to keep it updated and looking fresh. Replace the floor in the library, those are maintenance items that we're taking on. So we'll focus on those areas, particularly Wampatuck and the high school are two buildings that are older but are in great shape. And if we continue to maintain them, they'll stay in great shape. So that's the goal.
And if I could just follow up on that. I've been speaking at a lot of the PTO meetings, and bringing that point up that, if we're talking a lot of excitement, energy around the new school. And folks that won't have it that school, whether it's their children or their community members, we want to make sure that they know very clearly that we're not only maintaining, I don't even like that, but we want to improve and enhance all of our other buildings. And that's what this $250,000 is. And like Bob's approach to it is we try to save that for emergencies, so we're covered, very smart. And as we get closer to the end of the year, those emergencies have expired or any of that money left over, we're going to sink into investing in those other schools. And again, just 2 short years ago, we had zero money in there. So we're spending $250,000 every year enhancing all of our other schools. So they're not just, this library we're sitting is just an example. This could be in a brand new school. So we're not just settling for fixing things, we're going to make things better. And even a couple of other capital projects in the Wampatuck are new bathrooms and flooring and electrical outlets, so they can have new technology in there, just like a brand new school would. So the goal is within 5 years or so, when the new school is built, Wampatuck, for example, in Jenkins, will be not as new, but comparatively with all the right. So the learning experiences is the goal. That learning experience can model the brand new school. That's our.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the transparency on how that process takes place. Have any questions?
I'm just gonna stay here, but I don't know where I'm coming.
I can feel. Oh, so special education, the increases for next year, I guess it's not really in this budget thing, but just to, I guess that's more looking towards 23-24 planning, but any comment on that, just the state of.
Sure. What Strandolini's talking about is the state has a division called OSD, Operational Services Division. And one of their responsibilities is to set the inflation rate for private special education schools that we send our students to. And for next year, they set the rate at 14%, which means that we'll be paying 14% more for every student that is attending an in-state special education school. The estimated cost to us for next year, assuming we have no other students involved in, especially in out-of-district placements, is a little over $400,000. So that's an amount that we have to plan for next year that A, we hadn't anticipated, and B, any reimbursement for circuit breaker we won't see for a year later. So it's not going to help us with any shortfall that we may have next year. I will say that the superintendent has already reached out to our legislators and is looking for support to see if that can be rolled back. I understand their expenses are going up, but that's true for everyone. They're trying to hire staff and bring people on with signing bonuses. We all have some shortfalls, and if we could provide signing bonuses for bus drivers and van drivers and difficult positions to fill, it would be nice, but we don't have that, that luxury of having a 14% increase. So we're working on getting it modified, but we're gonna have to plan for it to be part of the reality.
If I can just add to that, and I think, thank you for the question. If you put things in perspective, I think the user fees was $250,000 approximately that we got rid of last year. We had to do a lot of really good preparation over your time. This kind of hit us out of the blue, and it's, you know, almost double that amount, and so that's significant. So we're, you know, good news is we're advocating. I spoke to Representative Shino tonight, who said support. So they're reaching out. It's not a completely done deal yet. It would come through the governor's budget. So there's a lot of superintendents are reaching out. If you know anyone, school committee members, legislature, or that, you know, we have to bring up the point. I think the average over the last 13 years of raises was 1.78%. So if you think you get, you know, you get used to that 1.78%, you get back to 14%. You know, what we're asking the legislatures to work on and the eventually the governor's budget to have reflected is maybe we understand that money is needed to support these special education programs. We just asked that maybe it's done spread out, maybe 5% over 3 years.
Yeah.
Something like that. Because just hearing some other schools where 400,000, some are 500,000, 600,000. I mean, these are budget breakers. And again, Bob and I are really, you know, grinding down, and we've already told our principals and cost center folks that tighten the belt buckle because of this, because we have to make up for this somehow and prepare for it. So we'll keep you posted.
Is this something we could potentially prepay for if we have excess money in the budget this year, or is it more we have to have it as part of the FY24 budget?
Well, we'll have to have it as part of the FY24 budget, but some of it, if there is surplus funds, particularly in circuit breaker, that we have to expend this year, we could prepay, but you can only prepay 3 months worth. So there's a limit even there as to how much of it we could prepay.
Yeah, it's a big increase. So we appreciate your reaching out to the legislature and all of your work and everything, and having a good, strong budget already helps soften the blow, but it's still a lot. So I'll definitely reach out to legislators as well, and encourage everyone on the school committee to do so.
Senator Kearney, Senator O'Connor.
Yeah, parents do, yeah, to point.
Yeah, parents, and I know Dr. Bobert's on the call. We're gonna let our
Yeah.
CPAC parents know, and just
Right.
it's a community thing that everyone can just knows anybody that has an impact on the budgets. Share that concern and that there are solutions to it.
Thank you.
So based on the increase that we're seeing, do we see enough of a cohort that it's actually cost savings for us to bring kids back in and have services, or is it too wide across students that it really wouldn't benefit us at all?
Well, ultimately, you know, that's a decision for our special education director. But
Maybe it's a question for another night. I guess it's just.
well, I think in my conversations with her, we're always looking to bring programming back in, but when it's a one-off, and you know, if there aren't enough students needing those interventions, it doesn't make it worthwhile. So I guess summary answer is you can feel confident that she's keeping an eye on that, and if there are enough students that we think we can provide as good or better programming for those students, we would bring that program in-house.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Did you have anything else, Superintendent Burkhead, yet for your? Okay, just checking. I don't know if you had all of them. All right, approval of minutes from October 3rd. Questions?
Move to approve the October 3rd, 2022 school committee minutes as presented.
All in favor?
Aye.
Dr. Dash with one warrant for us.
So we have a warrant S 22-1117 Total amount is $352,240.94. Of that, $246,163.01 is from our local budget. We'll go through the large items first out of revolving accounts. Food service account, $14,444.31 for food supplies. Out of the Metco grant, we've spent $16,025. Out of the capital account for the Hatherley project, we've spent $14,843.13. And then out of the IDEA grant, the special ed grant, we've spent $58,203.66. Out of our local education account, significant expenses are private school tuition, $171,144.80 to a variety of private schools. Out of transportation, we spent $32,227.16. We turned in 19 buses, and when those buses come off lease, they have to be prepared for resale. That includes new tires, brakes, oil changes, and then any repair to body damage that may have occurred. So that's what that expense was for. And then for IT contract services, $11,912.81. And that was for our licensing for the Google Suite, Google Gmail, for anything G Suite, Google Classroom, primarily, Gmail.
Great.
That's it. And if there's any questions, happy to answer those.
All right, thank you so
Thank you.
much. Correspondences. Nothing there. Other business that anyone wants to bring up this point or future agenda items,
What are subcommittee updates
subcommittee,
that are on here?
other business.
All right.
You're right, we should put that in something.
I attended the financial forecast meeting with Dr. Dutch on the 8th of November. I always say it's the most important thing, and it's kind of in line with what we're doing tonight, anticipating what our budget may be for next year. Pretty important meeting relative to adjustments. One big line item on the financial forecast, which is the Plymouth County retirement assessment, which is basically the pension plan for all municipal employees, I believe, with the exception of teachers. Or union members or teachers, something to that. Just teachers. And I don't know if it's coincidence or it's the same people working on it, but the Plymouth County Retirement came back and said that they're going to increase our contributions by 14%. So that means that the town and school district lose about, well, we have to budget an extra $408,000 for that anticipated expense. That was a net loss to the schools of roughly $260,000. But there were some other line items that we were able to use to offset that decrease. We increased our new growth and estimated local receipts just to kind of offset those that negative number. So we just became less conservative in those estimates to offset that large increase. But it was an important meeting, and we'll have either one or two more meetings leading into probably the end of January that will bring in these numbers more in line with what the real numbers should be, and that will ultimately determine what the school will receive from the town. But it wasn't necessarily a great meeting from our perspective, but we offset some of the negative news with the increase there. And then today, actually, before this meeting, I met with Superintendent Burkhead and Bob just to go over the budget, the fiscal year 23 budget that Bob presented here. We just went over a little bit more in detail. But I think that this is helpful. We've never, I don't want to say we've never, but we've rarely seen kind of a quarterly or regular update. I think that this is, in my expectations, kind of exactly what I was looking for. And the first thing that I want, really, I just want to see what the bottom line is. How are we doing? Are we overspending our entire budget, or are we on target? And my takeaway is that this is good. With that 3 million year-to-date available. I was nervous, thinking that we were going to be overspent, but nope, we're not. So that was it.
Great. Thank you. I attended the capital planning meeting. Nothing school related came up, but it was just a generalized conversation about maintenance and such, so. I'm just keeping that in perspective for the new school, and that those questions will come up from community members and how the schools maintaining our current buildings, and for us to also be ready with how to support how we know that it is being done. And, as Superintendent Burke had said, beyond maintenance is more, accelerating that. So that's a good point to be made. But I talked to select board member Goodrich last week, but and just kind of looking to work more together, more closely, and make sure that we're all kind of up to date on what goes on both sides. So no real updates exactly. Yeah. All right. So next meeting, December 5th, and there's nothing else. I will take a motion to adjourn at 8:10.
So moved.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.